Hello guys, and welcome to another video tutorial. My name is Victor, and today I will talk about a really interesting topic. Today I will show you how to select the categories tree from the database and how to show it on the web page using a recursive PHP function. Alright, what I'm talking about, right? So if you see my browser right now, I have here a drop down menu. When I click on it, I see that I have four categories. The first one is web development, and then I have backend, PHP, and desktop development. You also can see that there is another option which is select a category. We will talk about that in the next step. Okay, we have four categories, and you also can see that we have some subcategories. So web development has a subcategory which is backend, and then the backend category has another subcategory which is PHP. How do you understand that those two categories are subcategories? Before this name, before the subcategory's name, you can see that there is a little space, there is some space between the name, between the title, and that's how we understand which category is the main category and which category is a subcategory. All right, I have a database already. I work with PHPMyAdmin, and I have my tutorial database. In this database, I have a categories table, and this table has three columns. There is the first one, ID, name, and the parent. I have all those four categories here, and I think you will want to insert the same categories with the same values because it will be easier for you to understand while I will explain how this PHP function works. Now, this PHP function looks like this. I have here a PHP function which is category 3, and then I call this function on the bottom of this file where you can see right now, but I call this function in a select HTML tag. So the first option when I was talking about is this one, select a category. So it's right here, and the first option gets a 0 value, and then it shows the name, which is the select category, and then the others options will be returned by my PHP function, my recursive function. All right, now I'm going to explain everything from this function and how it actually works. All right, as you see here, I have on the left side my categories table from the database. On the right side, I have the PHP function, the PHP code, and then there's another dark block. And then in this block, I will write everything we will assign to our output variable from our function. All right, we call our function on the bottom of the file, and then if we go on the first, if we go on the top of this PHP function, we can see that we have our function, and then the function's name, which is category 3, and then we have 3 parameters. When we call this function, we don't write any parameters, right? So here we can see that we have 3 parameters. The first parameter is output variable, which is empty. When we call this function for the first time, this parameter is this variable, it's null, it's empty. And then we have our parent, which is 0, and then there is the indent that is also null. Now excuse me. Now we assign to our DB variable the connection to the database, and on the next step we have an SQL query, and we want to select the categories from the categories table where the parent it's equal to our parent variable. So our parent variable is 0 right now, right? So what do we want from here actually? We want to go in our table and look for the categories that have on the parent column 0. We go to our categories table and we see that there is web development that has 0 on the parent column, and then there is the desktop development that has 0 as well. So we have 2 categories. Now on the next step we have a while, and this while checks the condition. Did our SQL query find any category in the database? Yes. If this condition is true, then we assign to our output variable an HTML tag, which is a new option, and we assign to these options value the first category's ID, which is 1 in our case. So we have web development. Also at the name we will show the indent variable, but in our case, for this step right now, our indent is null, it's empty, so it doesn't show anything. And then we have our category's name, which means that our output gets the first category, which is web development. Let me write it in our block here. In our development. On this step, we are on the first cycle of our while. So I'm gonna write here 1. Our parent is 0 on this step. And then we have our indent, which is it's null for now, for this step. Alright, we've got the first category. Now we have, on the next step, we check, is this category's ID different than parent? So this category's ID is 1. Our parent is 0. Is 1 different than 0? Yes, it is. That's true. Now we call, if this condition is true, we call this function again, which means, so this process is recursive because we call this function again. And we call this function with new parameters. We have our output variable, and this output variable has already an option, has an HTML tag. And then we call, like if you see here on the second parameter on the top, there was our parent, which was 0. Right now our parent is this category's ID, which is 1. So we call with the parent 1. And now our indent gets 2 spaces here. If you see these codes here, it gets 2 spaces. So let me write down here our parent becomes 1, and then our indent gets 2 spaces. All right, we go to the top. So we have another, but don't forget that we are still on the first cycle, and we still have another category which has the parent 0. Don't forget, because that's important. Now we go and we have another, we call this function again, right, the second time, and we have another query. We go to our database and we want to look for the categories that have the parent equal to the parent variable, right? So our parent variable right now it's 1. Now we go to our table and we are looking for categories that have on the parent column 1. So we see here we have our backend. All right, now we go to the next step. We have our while here, and this while checks, is this condition true? Is this condition true? Yes, it is, because we have a category. We found something in our database. Now we are going to assign to our output variable a new option tag, and we assign to this tag's value this category's ID, the backend category's ID, which is 3, and then we will show before the name of these categories our indent variable, which in our case the indent gets 2 spaces, right? So we show the first 2 spaces, and then we show the category's name, and we assign everything to our output variable. And I'm gonna write right here that we have the second category, and it gets 2 spaces before the name, and then it gets the name, which is backend. All right, we have another condition on the next step. We check, is this category's ID different than parent? So parent right now is 1. This category's ID is 3. Is 3 different than 1? Yes, it is. We go to the next step and we call this function again, but don't forget that we are on the second cycle. we're on the second cycle on our while. So when we call this function again, we call it with new data, with new parameters. In our output we already have two categories, and we call this function with a new parent, which is 3. This category's ID is 3, and then we add to our indent variable 2 more spaces. So our parent becomes now 3, and our indent gets 2 more spaces. So right now it has 4. Okay, we go here, we call this function again, we go to our SQL query, and we are looking for tables now. We're looking for categories that have on the parent column the parent's variables value. So we are going to select the categories that have on the parent column 3, because our parent is 3. So we found here PHP. Alright, we go to our while, and this while we'll check again. Is this condition true? Yes, it is, because we found a category. And now we're assigning to our output variable another option, another HTML tag, and we assign to this options value the PHP categories ID, and and on the name, before the name, we will show the indent variable, which has 4 spaces right now, and then we will show the name. So let's write down here, we have 4 spaces, and then we have the category name, which is PHP. And don't forget that we are on the 3rd cycle right now. That's important. Okay, now we check. Is this category's ID different than the parent? So our parent right now is 3. Is 4 different than 3? Yes, it is. Then we call this function again with new parameters. So our output becomes 4. Our parameter, like our output, has 3 categories right now, right? So we have another parent, which is 4 right now, and then our indent gets 2 more spaces, and right now this indent will have 6 spaces. Okay, we go back to the top. We have another SQL query, and we check if there is any categories that have on the parent column 4, because our parent is 4 right now. We go through our table, and we didn't find anything. Now on the next step, with our while checks, is this condition true? No, this returns false now, because we don't have any data. We didn't find anything in our categories table. So this while won't run right now. Now, if we didn't find anything, we are going back to the previous step. We were on the third cycle, right, of our while. We went to the 3rd one, and we were looking for categories that have on the parent column 3. So we found the PHP, but we found just one. There isn't any other category that has the same parent, which means we are going to the 2nd cycle. We go back again, and we were looking on the 2nd cycle. We were looking for categories that have on the parent column 1. So we found backend, but we have just 1. We don't have any other category that have the same parent. So that means that we go back, we go another step back. So we go in the 1st cycle, when we just call this function, and this output was null, and this parent was 0, and indent was null too. But because we have this character here, which is end, This means that our function saved all the data from our output variable. So when we are on the first cycle right now, we still have everything from our output variable, which means that we have 3 categories assigned to this variable. Now we go and get the next category, because on the first cycle we found the web development and we found the desktop development, right? So we get the next category, we get the next category, which is desktop development, and our while checks if that's true, like if this condition is true. If there's any other category, then we output, like we assign to our output variable another option HTML tag, and we assign to the value of this tag the category's ID, which is 2 in this case. And before this category's name, we want to show the indent, but because the indent is null from the first cycle, we don't show anything before this category. So we just show the category's name, which is desktop development, and I'm gonna write it right here. Now we go and check to the next step. Is this category's ID different than parent? Our parent is 0. This category's ID is 2. Is 0 different than 2? Yes, it is. Then we call this function. Again with new data. Now our output has 4 categories, and the new parent is going to be 2. So now I will write here the parent is 2. Our indent gets two spaces, and I'll write here that it got 2 spaces. New parameters. We go and check again the database. Is there any category that have on the parent column the current parent? Like the current parent is 2 right now. When we go to our table and check, is there any category that have on the parent column number 2? No, there is no such category, which means that this condition from this while is not true. It will return false. And that means that we don't have any other data in the database. Now, after this while is done, our function will return our variable output. So after this function will return this output, our script will show all these categories, all these functions, because they are PHP tags. This script will show them as other options from this select HTML tag, which will look like this, like a drop-down menu. Now it's very important to understand this process, because it's a really interesting way to use recursive functions, and it's very useful. They may save you a lot of time and a lot of code, because you can just call this same function as many times you want with different parameters and do different like cool and useful things. So maybe you saw something like this on WordPress. When you want to add another category, there is like choose a parent for your category, and then there's a drop down menu like here, and you choose a parent for your category, and you can make it a subcategory if you want, or you can make it as a parent, and you don't have to choose any other parent for this category. Now if you add some more categories here, it will still show here. It'll never stop. Like, let me insert one: PHP, Java, JavaScript, and the ID was 1. So I save it. And if I go here and refresh and I click on this drop down menu, we can see that there is another subcategory for our web development right here. That's it for now, guys. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, subscribe for this channel, share it with your friends, and don't forget that all these video tutorials are for you to help you in the web development field. Thank you very much and see you in the next video tutorial.